Who's going to go?
Just let me know when.
Good to go.
Good morning. This is a convening of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, and we do not need to hold a roll call because we are here in person at 101 Federal Street. It is Wednesday, January 31st, just a few minutes beyond our 9 a.m. start, and today is a special meeting that involves interviews for the candidates of the IEB Director position. It is public meeting number 497, and before we get started with our first candidate, I do want to note to my fellow commissioners, pursuant to our enhanced code of ethics, that I did file a 23B3 disclosure. Today we have two candidates. One is an internal candidate. I filed the disclosure while I only know candidate Caitlin Monahan professionally, because that candidate must, that position must report to the chair by statute. I felt that I would take the extra precaution, really out of an abundance of caution, to file that disclosure with my appointing authority. Okay. Does anybody else have anything before we get started? Okay. Good. We're back on time. Today we'll get started with the review of the two candidates for the Investigation and Enforcement Bureau selection process. I want to thank the two commissioners who were part of that screening committee. That would be Commissioner Hill, thank you very much. And then in your capacity as chairwoman, Commissioner Skinner, thank you for the screening process. And then, of course, that committee was rounded out with the addition of Chief David Muldrew, our Chief People and Diversity Officer. Before we get started with the candidate, I think that you're just going to remind us of the process, Commissioner Skinner.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief, just brief enough to remind folks who are watching from the public that this commission convened the IEB Director Screening Committee, and over the course of the past month, really, we started January 2nd, that committee has been hard at work interviewing candidates for the IEB Director role. We said from the beginning that we did not have a set predetermined number of candidates that would result from that process, but we unanimously selected Before we do that, I do want to take just another opportunity to thank my fellow committee members, Commissioner Hill and Chief Muldrew, Chief People and Diversity Officer, who is not here, but great work by all. Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we call candidates in, I had a process question. I don't know if this is the right time. Or we're going to have a discussion about that before we go?
I think that we have next on the agenda is to interview our two candidates.
But for me, this is also a question. So I just want to clarify when in this process reference checks and background checks are being conducted.
So it's my understanding on the job description that you do make it clear that the offers will be subject to a background check. In terms of references, Commissioner Skinner?
No, I think that's right. Obviously, there was not a reference check conducted by the screening committee. And so it's my understanding, just as is done with all other employees, once a job offer is made, it's at that point that the screening happens in terms of the background.
The
yes.
references. So just so I can be clear, I normally would be at this stage having references done. So I I may be reserving that request as we go through today, depending on how these interviews proceed.
Oh, I see, reference checks.
Correct.
Yeah, this committee did not conduct references.
Okay. So we'll get started. We're very close to our time frame. We'll get started then with the interview of candidate Caitlin Monahan, and thank you to our team for assisting.
Thank you.
Have a seat.
Great.
Make you awkward when we reach over the table.
Yeah, exactly. Say hi to everybody.
Yeah. So, Ms. Monahan, Caitlin, to us, want to make sure the green light was on. I didn't do that at the beginning of the meeting, so.
Appears to be on.
Okay, excellent. First off, welcome.
Thank you.
And it's nice to see you in person and not behind a screen. It is nice to see my fellow commissioners in person, and we are looking forward to a conversation today. First off, thank you for applying for this important position, and congratulations to being one of the 2 finalists.
Thank you.
We know it's difficult to have to do this process in public. Pretty much doesn't happen this way. So thank you again for being willing to be part of this public process. I'm going to turn to Commissioner Skinner, who served as chairwoman of the screening committee, for the first question.
Thank you, Chair. This is a, thank you. This is, of course, you know, we had the opportunity, Commissioner Hill and I, to talk to you extensively during your interview before the screening committee. I'll just ask my first question there, which is, why are you interested in this position, Caitlin? You're currently Deputy General Counsel for the Mass Gaming Commission. Why the shift?
Absolutely. So 3 years ago, I came to the commission to return to public service after having spent about a decade in a law firm. And I am incredibly proud of what we have accomplished in that time here, not the least of which, of course, is bringing sports wagering to life here in the Commonwealth. And one of the things that I learned about myself while I was at the law firm is that I really enjoy leading teams and managing. I love working with a group to, complete a project with great results. And so this opportunity to lead the IEB at an agency that I care a lot about is a really compelling opportunity, and one that I'm very excited to be applying for.
Okay. Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So let's talk about the management experience that you had with the law firm a little
Yes.
bit. Because in the resume, it doesn't speak to it a lot.
Okay.
So this would be your opportunity to talk to us about how many people you have managed. And actually, as a follow-up to that question, your management style.
Absolutely. So at the law firm, the last position I had at the law firm was that of counsel, and that is the management position, the associate level management position at the firm. And so in that role, I would manage 3 to 4 cases at a time, and that would have up to about 20 associates and staff members at a time. So I'd have 3 to 4 cases, about 20 associates and staff members underneath me, and I would be in charge of really all of the day-to-day ongoings of the case and making sure that, again, we were achieving great results for our clients. And that would include everything from figuring out what the strategy was for the case, signing out the work, making sure that it was done on time, making sure that it was done exceptionally well, and coordinating with the client to make sure everything was to their liking. And then, of course, I had, much like the commission here, I had 3 to 4 different partners above me who were I was reporting up to and making sure that they were happy with how things were going on the cases. So I did that role I was in that role for about the last 4 years of my time at the firm. Before that, though, the model at the firm was to grow your management experience over time so that you had that capacity by the time you got to the council role. So for those, 6 years leading up to the last 4 that I was in the council role, I was managing discovery attorneys. So those are the attorneys who are doing all the document review on big cases, making sure that was all getting done effectively and well. And then as I became a senior associate, I was managing associates and making sure that work was getting done well and guiding them and helping them to grow in their roles. So it was a process up to that point. And I think it's fair to say too here that at the commission, while I'm not in a managerial role as the deputy general counsel, I did take on a management type role in guiding the promulgation of the sports wagering regulations. That was obviously a very big job. We had a lot of regulations to get through to get sports wagering up and running by this time last year, actually, maybe even to the day.
Yes, exactly to the day.
To the day. And so that was a big job where we pulled our team together, we pulled outside counsel together, and you saw it. We made a plan quickly, what we had to do every week to get that up and done, and we did it. So I was very proud of that too.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Brien.
So one of the follow-up questions Commissioner Hill had that I'll let you jump into in terms of this is describing your management style. I think you got to
Yeah, sorry.
I have the same question that I
Yeah.
throw out, so I just couldn't put that in reserve. But the one I wanted to focus on more for you is your investigations experience in particular. Describing, you've described the law firm environment. You've had some time in the DA's office, interning in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Describe for me in more detail the level of investigative experience that you would bring.
Absolutely. So I think there's a lot. So at the law firm, I was a litigator. And so that meant that I dealt with large-scale, multi-year, multi-million-dollar litigations, and we were usually the defense counsel. And as you probably know, any case like that starts with an allegation against your client. That your client is alleged to have done something wrong. And then the investigation begins, right? And so what you have to do then, it's your job to figure out what happened. And so I have extensive experience with discovery, so that means, one of the things we would do is figure out what documents do we need to collect and review, and that could be in the hundreds of thousands to millions of pages of documents. So you'd collect it, figure out a plan for going through it, making your chronologies, figuring out what happened, large-scale document review with a lot of people working on it. That's one piece. Then you have depositions, which are very akin to the interviews we have here in the investigation in the IEB. So we would have certain cases with dozens of depositions across the country, and I'd have to make sure that we were, the depositions were consistent, we were getting the right information that we needed from the right people, that we were deposing the right people, and that we were getting that all. And in a civil litigation, that discovery process is the bulk of the case. It's the years and years and years of the case. So really, in my 10 years at the firm, probably 80 to 90% of my time was sort of in that discovery phase. And so I think that experience with large-scale civil litigation discovery is directly applicable to the investigatory work that we do here in the IEB.
And in the 6 or so weeks that you've been in the acting position, can you speak to the transferability of that law firm work to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, not specifically with regard to investigations at this point, although that has started. So we've been starting to see, again, without naming any names or anything like that, we're consistently getting reports of new developments, potential disciplinary actions in other jurisdictions. And so you have to figure out how are you going to deal with that, either in the context of suitability or in the context of ongoing suitability or just noncompliance. And so making sure that we understand what the issue is, again, having those initial calls with the operators of the licensees to make sure you understand what they're reporting to you, and then making sure that the appropriate team has that information to incorporate it into, either final suitability or just ongoing suitability, and then keeping up on that to making sure it's all, everything is getting accounted for. That's how I've seen it so far, and I would anticipate if I were to continue in this role, getting more involved with making sure, taking a look at, what are we asking, what are we finding here, and sort of getting more into the weeds on that.
Thanks. Oh, I
And
reserve
apologies,
Commissioner
yeah,
Hill's question.
I didn't complete your question before us.
Madam Chair, would you mind if she was to finish
Please.
that answer?
It's on my list too, so here we go.
So you
Thank
asked about management style, is that?
Yes.
So there are, I think, 3 things that are really important to me as a manager, sort of my guiding principles as a manager. One is communication. I think when you're leading a large team and you have a lot of different tasks, it's critically important that everybody knows what's going on. And so that involves frequent communications with the staff to make sure things are going according to plan, going smoothly, and most importantly, perhaps, if there are any concerns or issues, that those are identified quickly and resolved. Because, I have had experiences in other situations, other positions, where you're potentially not getting that quick feedback, or, it's kind of getting pushed under the rug a little bit, and you're not learning that something is not going right, right? And if you don't tell someone that something is not going right, it is not going to magically start going right. So again, having those constant conversations, providing feedback and constructive criticism so that things can keep going is important. And of course, here with the commission, communication to the commission. I think one of my goals would be no surprises, right? I don't want anything to happen that's serious or important or hits the press without the commission knowing about it. So again, knowing what needs to go up is important too. The second thing relates to relationships, and I think, it's really important to relationships and culture. So it's really important to have a strong culture in your agency or in your division. And I think the previous IEB directors have absolutely created and fostered that. It's a great team. And so what I think that means is, again, leading with kindness. You can be straightforward and you can be honest, but kindness. And that's really important to fostering a team that wants to come to work every day and work together. So that's not something that just happens on its own. It has been created by the previous directors, and that needs to be maintained. And the other thing I'm blanking on, but I think for now, again, communication and sort of culture are very important.
Madam Chair, I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
So, thank you for the first two. Maybe the third one is this. I would like to know, are you a delegator? Are you somebody who's going to be looking over someone's shoulder day in and day out? How are you going to treat the employees under you to make sure that the work gets done?
Yes.
But in a way that's comfortable, as you have said.
Absolutely, and you have led me back to the thought that I forgot, and that is trusting your staff and delegating is critical for a manager, especially for this role where there are so many staff and so many different divisions and tasks under, in the IEB. So yeah, absolutely, you have to trust your staff, and the way you get there is to, build them up into the place where you can trust what they do and you don't have to check all their work. And obviously, the IEB is running really smoothly right now, and it's great. So I've in this role, even in the last month, going to the chiefs, getting their advice, and then ultimately the decision does lie with me, right? The buck has to stop with the director, but knowing who you can go to get that information and trust their work. So yeah, that, and of course delegation. You couldn't know everything about everything as the director. It's impossible. So you have to be able to sort of triage what's most important, long-term and short-term, get that information to the level you need it, but not sort of be in the weeds, checking every document, checking every decision. You do have to trust the staff. And then ultimately, again, I make the final decision and I'm responsible for those decisions. And if something doesn't go quite right, that's on me. But, it's a team effort, truly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you. Commissioner Maynard.
Well, so we're all stealing each other's questions today, so
all good.
I know this is probably your first public interview, and it's mine too, so we can settle in together, right? Looking at 23K and any delegations under 23N,
Yep.
what do you think the role of the IEB director is? You've talked a lot about management and management of the team,
Yeah.
but what do you think vis-a-vis the commission that role is? That's my first question. It's a two-parter, and I can
Sure.
repeat it at any time. What do you want to get done in your first year as IEB director?
That's great. Both great questions. So with regard to the first question, 23K and 23N are a little bit different, but I think they both envision roles for the Bureau, of course. It's a little bit more explicit in 23K than 23N, but I think 23N in a lot of ways built on 23K. It knew the commission that it was assigning sports wagering to and sort of the divisions within that agency. And so I feel like to the extent that we're still developing that, I think. You know, it's new. It's only been a year, and so we're figuring out what is going to be the role of the IEB with regard to, you know, non-compliance events. How is that going to work? And I think we're figuring it out together. We're very flexible. You know, I think the commission will decide as we go what it wants to delegate, if anything, to the IEB, but we do stand ready to take on those tasks as necessary or as wanted. And I think there are a lot of similarities between the work of under 23K and 23N. So again, we stand ready to the extent the commission wants us to do that. The second question, goals for the next few years. So I think one of the things that I was really struck by when I sort of came into this role was realizing that because of the overlays between 23K and 23N, and the different timelines for suitability, licensing, all of these things, and renewals, of course, right? The work of the IEB looks a little bit like this right now, right? Because 23K and 23N don't necessarily coordinate with each other for the 5-year timelines or the 3-year timelines for renewals. And so one of the things that's really important that we look at is what does the next year, 2 years look like for the investigatory work and the licensing work for all those licenses and renewals? And is there a way that we can kind of smooth it out so the work is a little bit more level instead of going up and down? That's one thing. But along with that, sort of tied to that, is the staffing needs of the IEB. Again, now we have a whole new industry that we're, at a minimum, investigating licensing, right? And then we may end up with some more work related to some of the non-compliance or enforcement matters. And so what do we need once we get through this, you know, initial hump of durable suitability, right, for all the Cat 1s and Cat 3 sports wagering licenses? What is our staffing needs? And that's something we need to start thinking about right now, because that needs to be in the 2025 budget. So I've actually already started working with the team on what do the needs look like going forward, what should we be proposing for 2025, and how do we start onboarding people so that they can get up to speed by the time we need them in those roles. So that's sort of like really on the ground, hard tax things that need to happen in the next year. I think another thing, actually, I have to attribute this to Commissioner Hill, this came up in my first interview, is a more proactive role for the IEB. I think to date, at least in the last year, my experience is that we have reacted to events, right? We've gotten new licensees and we have had to investigate and do that. So we've reacted, and that's exactly appropriate and what we should be doing. But I think there is a real opportunity to sort of start looking forward and identifying issues that may arise or things that we should be monitoring in a different way or different information we should be bringing to the commission and being just a little bit more proactive. And again, I've even had a conversation yesterday, I won't name names, but I had a conversation with one of the chiefs yesterday about some ideas for staffing going forward for sort of monitoring in a more proactive way. So you're not waiting for disclosures to come in, but you're maybe, you know, looking, you have someone in a role who's sort of monitoring SEC filings and things like that. Yeah, I think those are two of the main things going forward.
I yield, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the answers that you've given so far, Caitlin. So building on Commissioner Maynard's question, can you elaborate on, your answer around the 23K and 23N was sort of the distinction around perhaps the authority that 23K gives IEB versus the authority it gives IEB in 23N.
Yeah.
Could you just elaborate on your understanding of the governance structure of this commission?
Yeah.
And how that governance structure will inform how you do your work on a daily basis?
Absolutely. So, you know, the governance structure, my understanding of the governance structure per statute is that the chair of the IEB doesn't report to the executive director. All the other directors report to the ED, but the chair reports to the chair, or the director reports to the chair. And so, you know, that's it. You report up to the chair. And then the commission is, of course, sort of at the top of everything. So the 5 commissioners in their role as commissioners make those final decisions about really everything that goes to the commission. So that is, I think, you know, how 23K is set out, and 23N would follow.
So one of the issues that we have to carefully balance, in fact, we'll be addressing this tomorrow, is the idea that we serve as a regulatory body, and then we also serve as an adjudicatory body. You were very helpful in your position as Deputy General Counsel, and advising me on how to make sure I have proper guardrails about what I can inquire about in terms of facts, what I can inquire about in terms of what may be anticipated, because if I go too far, I could be putting myself in a position where I might have to recuse myself.
Absolutely.
Should there's be a potential for adjudicatory bias. I'm going to ask in my role as chair how you would deal with a tough scenario. You indicated to the commission that you feel that your job will be to make sure there are no surprises to this commission.
Yes.
If the chair were to say that further disclosure of certain facts to the commission could compromise all 5 of our ability to be neutral in a matter,
Yeah.
how, and you felt differently, how would you handle that complex issue, given that you've just said no surprises?
Yeah, no, and I mean, again, this is all case by case, and I am very aware of.
I'm sorry, it's all.
Sorry, it's all case by case, I think.
No, on that, just this fact base, the idea that you say, I feel a need to tell the commission these facts. And the chair, who is, you report to, says, I think we have to be careful.
It's really hard to answer that question, sort of it's very, very hard to answer that question without specific facts, because, again, I'm trying to answer your question, but it's very, very factual. And so I think, obviously, the chair has a lot of discretion to advise direct the director of the IEB to do or not do certain things. But I do believe ultimately that if it was something that I truly believed was very, very important to go to the commission, and we had checked with the general counsel to make sure that there weren't any legal concerns about that, I think there may be things that do have to go to the full commission. But again, we'd want to have a really respectful conversation and do it the right way and make sure it was all legal. But I do think the commission is the ultimate body overseeing the whole agency in the IEB. So it's a difficult question and hard to answer without specific facts.
Okay. Besides your work in discovery, and the large law firm does the description you gave for that process is something I think most of us here are very familiar with, so we understand that. Besides that work in discovery, you did about 10 years at the large law firm. How else would your work here at IEB be informed by the work that you did during those 10 years?
Sure. So, we've already talked about management discovery.
Right.
I just think team relations and client relations is really important. So, not everyone is always going to agree on a strategy or a path forward. And learning how to, one of the things I learned at the firm was how to really listen. Even if the first time you hear an idea from someone, you really think that can't be right. Really taking a step back and saying, let me listen. These are smart people who know their jobs. And let me make sure I really understand what they're arguing, because there were plenty of times at the firm where my first reaction was, I don't think that's right. And then you kind of come around. It's like, oh, thinking about that more, looking at it from this angle. Okay, I can see that. So I guess one of the things I learned was to not get rooted in my first initial reaction, but to really listen. And again, rely on the staff and the expertise. And again, you do have to ultimately make that final decision, and it may have been what you thought it was first, but making sure you're listening. So that's something I really learned, was listening. And then additionally, when, reporting to a lot of different people who may not always agree. And so again, that can be challenging. And what you just have to do is do your best to provide the information you have, the guidance you have, and give your best idea, and then the decisions from the council or from the partner are going to be what they are, and you go with it, and that's it. And so not getting too stuck in, you know, whether you agree necessarily with what the partner or the commissioners think. So yeah, I think those are some of the things I learned at the firm.
Commissioner Skinner.
Caitlin, my question is, what is your approach to resolving conflicts? And the chair in her questioning alluded to one such potential conflict. What would be your approach? I don't want you to limit your answer to that context, but what would be your approach to resolving?
Yeah, I think my general approach to resolving conflicts is, again, communication. You know, getting the people in the room, having the conversation. What is the issue here? What are the different positions, and what can we do to get through this in ideally an amicable way? And again, you know, have experienced that at the firm where you have two partners on the same case who have a different idea for the strategy going forward, and working with them to try to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this, even if we all disagree, and just keeping it friendly. I mean, I will tell you, on the legal team, we do not always agree, and that's great, because there's an airing of different opinions, and then at the end of the day, Todd makes a decision and we go with it. But I like that kind of discussion. I think if everyone agreed all the time, or if people didn't feel comfortable coming to you with differences of opinion, we wouldn't be doing our job. And so I'm very I'm open to that and happy with it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know the answers to these questions, and I think everybody on this commission will know that you know the answers to this next question, but I do want to publicly ask you to talk to us about your experience in front of a public board.
Absolutely.
And then after that, Madam Chair, I have two more follow-up questions
Great.
to that.
Thank you.
But do you have experience dealing with a public board?
Yes. So for the last 3 years, in my role as Associate and Deputy General Counsel, it has been my job to provide information, analysis, and when requested, guidance to the Commission in a public forum. So I am pretty comfortable in that public forum and providing guidance in those public meetings to the Commission.
So the follow-up would have
Yeah.
been, you know, as the IEB Director, you're going to have a lot more face time, if you will, than you would even in your current position. And you just said you feel very comfortable with
Yeah.
that. And then, of course, we all have to adhere to the open meeting law, Madam Chair. And it's something that we've all had to come to learn to understand and live by.
Yeah.
I know you know what the open meeting law is.
Absolutely.
But would you elaborate a little bit more about your experience with it and, more importantly, how you would deal with it?
Absolutely. So again, have dealt with this for the last 3 years in the context of providing guidance to the chair in her role of setting the agenda and the commission with regard to what needs to be done in the open and what can be done in a closed session or in an executive session. And we are very, very cognizant of the rules related to that, both all statutory, honestly, and the limitations of that, which we see with sports wagering, where we don't have some of the same opportunities for executive session as we do with gaming. And so it's something that we always need to be very on top of. We need to be sure that we're getting it right, that we're putting the right information in the agenda, that we're doing it appropriately. And the commission is very comfortable with doing its work in public. So that is the default. But we're here to provide guidance, or I've been here to provide guidance on when it can go into a closed session.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner O'Brien.
Sure. So, Caitlin, kind of a double question, which is, what do you think the biggest challenge is for IEB in the next couple of years, just in general as IEB? And then if you were to be the director, what would be your biggest challenge in stepping into that role?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, honestly, is what I talked about before, which is trying to find a way to smooth this work out so that we're not having really steep highs, really highs, not a lot of lows, but, you know, really steep highs with regard to licensing and having tons of licenses become due at the same time. And so it's a really big challenge. And I think also I would anticipate that more staff will need to be onboarded, and so the ramping up process will be important. Again, bringing people in, making sure that they are up to speed, part of the culture, understand how we do things here in a public agency. That's a big job going forward. And then the second question was
As
for
to
me.
you in particular, what do you think your biggest challenge would be if you were to step into the director role on a permanent basis?
I think that, but I think, again, well, I don't want to get into the weeds and get over people's shoulders. I think, I do want to learn more about the day-to-day workings of some of the different operations. I was speaking with our director of licensing yesterday and saying that, were I to stay in this role, I'd want to really sit down and start learning about the licensing system and sort of the different steps for licensing and the different levels of licenses and all of that, because I think without understanding that nitty-gritty information, while not trying to micromanage it, just understand it, that's the kind of detail you do need to understand in order to sort of smooth things out and work towards that. So I would have some real work to do in understanding some of the more day-to-day work of the IEB.
And then one last follow-up question in terms of the investigative work at the law firm. If you had to quantify types of investigations, white-collar defense, traditional crime, for lack of a better description, can you break that down in terms of proportion of types?
What I did? Yeah, most of my work, probably 80 to 90%, was sort of civil litigation. So we would represent, a Fortune 500 company in a litigation in federal court usually. I did do, maybe 10, 15, these are ishy, right? 10 to 20% maybe of white collar type investigations. And so I did work on that kind of thing where we would be meeting with the AG's office, things like that, or U.S. attorney's offices. And then I did have, a pro bono practice too. So I did some work representing the BBO in one case, representing the Massachusetts, the Boston branch of the NAACP, and Mam Leo in one case. So I tried to sort of keep things a little bit fresh and do some different things in my practice.
And the defending the big clients. I guess I'm trying to get drilled down. You're talking consumer protection. Are you talking, shareholder liability suits? Like I'm trying to figure that out.
Right. Yeah, I get it. I was really all over the board. I sort of considered myself a generalist. I was in what was called our business trial group. And so we really took a lot of different things. And so I had one case that related to, I think what would have been sort of equivalent to like 93A claims against an insurance company. I worked a lot for an automotive manufacturer in dealer litigation. And so they would be sued by their dealers for, various alleged things. I worked for the state of Vermont in an issue in an administrative agency with regard to the nuclear power plant up there. So really sort of a diverse business practice, but I wasn't in securities. I wasn't in our securities group, although I did do some of those cases. I kind of was all over the place with that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Maynard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Caitlin, I think I just went on, watched a talk where they talked about leadership is getting more and more difficult because people really don't want to be led. They want to stand in the public square and shout, right? With that kind of lead up and wind up, what do you think this is different than management style to me, right? This is more aspirational.
Sure.
What's your leadership style, and who's a leader that you look up to?
It's an extremely good question. I have to say, a leader that we would all know is Loretta, honestly. I didn't know Loretta before I got here. Loretta, and our former director of the IEB. I found her style to be so effective, right? She was very bright and very calm and always knew the right time to bring advice and to give advice. And you could always go to her and know that you were getting good advice. It wasn't going anywhere else. You were having those conversations. And so I would seek to emulate someone like that who is just a steady force and is discreet and is, again, just bright and calm. And I found her to be a great leader. And from everything I've heard from being down in the IEB now, we know she's so well respected, as we all know. So that's what I think I would aim to do, sort of to be in what can be a tumultuous environment, to try to be the steady ship that people can go to for advice, and that, you know, you ultimately make that final decision with your team's input.
I have one follow-up, if I may, Madam Chair. So DEI is really important.
Of course.
And how, you know, in your role in the IEB, how do you promote DEI? How do we grow this ship?
Absolutely. So yes, DEI, we talked about this in my first interview too. DEI is extremely important, and I know how important it is to the commission. It's something that we're constantly working on improving. And the IEB has a big role in that for the commission, because my understanding is that the IEB represents about 75% of the staff of the commission. And so I think what we need to do is really think outside of the box for ways to expand our applicant pools, because that's how you get there, right? That's how you start improving your numbers. So, you know, beyond, and I know, you know, Chief Muldrew and his team are working on all of this too, and this would be a joint effort, but, you know, making sure that when you have a job posting, you're not just popping it up on the state website and Indeed and sort of letting it go its merry way, right? Making sure that you're reaching out to those affinity organizations in the fields that the postings are related to try to recruit new candidates and new folks into your pool. I think that's something that needs to be done actively, and I think that can actually be done by not just HR, but by all the members of the staff. You know, reach out to those organizations, reach out to your friends, reach out to the people, and try to recruit in. And I will say we did do that in the legal department in my time there when we were seeking to recruit new associates. You know, I personally sort of reached out to some individuals who I know who are related to other affinity organizations, tried to get the word out there through listservs, and, you know, took that proactive role. So I think that's something that's important, and I'll keep my eye on. I actually had a conversation with one of the chiefs about that for some postings we have the other day, and I know it's important.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, may I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
To Commissioner Maynard's question? Just in your, Commissioner Maynard just stated that diversity, equity, and inclusion is extremely important to this commission, but not just within our four walls. In your role as IEB Director, you may have the ability to impact individuals of color in your decision-making. How do you intend to mitigate any inadvertent negative impacts for people of color?
I think that's really important, and I think, you know, keeping that in mind and keeping in mind sort of historical injustices and issues with regard to people of color, and just making sure that if decisions are being made, they're being made fairly across the board. So, you know, are we treating, let's use an example of the, you know, involuntary exclusion list, right? You know, are we treating people who are potentially going on the involuntary exclusion list the same way? And making sure that color, race, you know, ethnicity, anything like that is not factoring in. And of course, we would never do that, right? But I think it does, you want to keep an eye on it, make sure that something isn't going, you know, isn't unfair. And again, you're being consistent across the board, and you can say, no, this is how we've treated these three people with these similar facts, and we're not sort of doing things differently for one person rather than another.
Thank you.
Can I just do a follow-up?
Of course.
And this is not a gotcha, but it will be, if you have it, if the answer is no, I would ask that you read it this afternoon. Are you familiar with the statement of purpose with respect to DEI that was adopted by the commission and the 5 action items, because it will implicate IEB?
I think I read it at the time it came through, but I haven't read it in a little while, so I will
Okay.
commit to reading that.
Yeah,
this afternoon.
to Commissioner Skinner's point, the IEB, we look at customer service and so the licensing and how we want to always ensure that we don't create unexpected barriers
Yeah,
for hiring.
absolutely.
And then, of course, the regulatory review, which legal has engaged in, kind of got put a little bit aside because there were some other regulations to promulgate. That's another area where we have found that, you know, with important tweaks, we can take down those barriers. So thank you, Commissioner Skinner, for the follow-up and for your question. It is critical work, and as you mentioned, with the Bureau having right now 75% of the staff, and that could be subject to change by statute. The chair could decide to shift those different segments, if you will, or divisions of the commission. I know at one point there were questions around, Commissioner Bryan, whether licensing should be in or out. So, but it's interesting that you point out 75%. So I've got a couple of questions that are important for this role, too.
Sure.
Can you describe an operational challenge that you address through a technical solution to create an administrative efficiency?
Sure. Just give me 1 second to think about that. So, I mean, two different things are sort of coming to mind with regard to the way I'm thinking about this is sort of like big amounts of data or information that kind of needs to be harnessed and harnessed so that you can understand it and then sort of report it out. And so one of the things I'm thinking about is sort of, again, my work back at the firm with regard to large-scale discovery. And so using, when you have quite literally millions of pages of documents, sort of making sure that you get them into the document review database and you get them organized and tagged in a way that makes them manageable so that you're identifying what's important, you're identifying what you need to review, what needs to be sent out. So I have a ton of experience doing that. So, taking the facts of the case and figuring out the way to sort of get through those documents and make sure you're catching the right things and interviewing them. So I have that experience. The second thing I'm thinking about is, again, the sports wagering regulations, taking all of the work that had to be done there, all of the different types of regs that we had to get into place, and creating, it was a spreadsheet, but of, what is the reg, who is in charge, what are all the deadlines, when is it going to come to the commission, when was it voted on, what are the outstanding action items, and having that be sort of a living document that we used in the legal team to get our work done, and that was critical. Every meeting that we had on the regs, that was open in front of us, sort of going through and making sure that we were on track and getting everything done. So I guess that would be how I would answer that.
Okay. I'm going to do a follow-up to my own question.
Great.
Roles and responsibilities, and the understanding of those are so important. I always feel that if everybody kind of understands their role and their responsibilities, that does make, just a workplace, kinder and smoother and more efficient, more operationally successful. You noted that under 23K, and I'm actually very interested in your answer.
Okay.
Because it could help me. Why, you noted that that the director's role is the only role that reports to the chair rather than the executive director. You're a very bright attorney. Why do you think the legislature made it that way?
I have not looked into the legislative history of it.
No, you wouldn't
yeah.
find it.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah, you've looked. I think it's likely due to the potentially sort of, like you said, sort of some of the sensitive nature of the work. And so that, you wouldn't want to be reporting that all up in a public meeting to a 5-member body, but you can sort of go to the chair and talk about those issues and those things, get input, guidance, direction from the chair without sort of having to sort of go up to the 5 all the time in a public meeting. That might be why the legislature did that.
Do you think the risk of adjudicatory bias plays into that at all?
I do. I think it could, absolutely. And that's, I think, sort of what I mean is,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, you decide, or the chair decides they need more information on a case, and that may get the chair to a point where the chair has to recuse himself or herself from being in the adjudicatory body. But then again, you've only affected one commissioner, and
That's
you
right.
still have the 4 who can then rule on the case. So yeah, I think that absolutely could be a part of it, a big part of it.
Didn't mean to lead you, but I'm.
No, the
I'm
leading
just
was helpful.
going with sort of clarification.
We're not in court, so it's okay.
Now, I'm going to ask a question that I learned from a role in my past when I watched other very apt interviewers ask questions. It was one that was always interesting to me. In your roles, either at the firm or here, have you had someone who performs the role of administrative assistant or administrative ease? And if I were to call that person, what would they say? about you.
Yes, I did have an assistant at the firm for my entire time at the firm. And if you call, and I had several over time as my roles changed, but if you called them, I would hope that they would say to you that I was always kind, always clear in my instructions and the deadlines that we had for the tasks that needed to be done, that I understood when there were mitigating circumstances where something might not get to be done, and that again, that I was someone you could go to and, you know, not be concerned about, oh, I didn't do this right, my goodness, she's going to be so mad. Like, no, it's fine, you know, we'll get through it together, it's not a big deal. And I will say that I think some of my work, you know, again, the way I interact with people comes from both, you know, great mentors along the way, but also I was an assistant. You know, that was one of my first jobs out of law school or out of college was as an assistant at the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security. So I've been on both sides of this, and I think having that experience too is really important because I saw those people come in the door and ignore the admin. I didn't love it. You know, on the other hand, the very important people, who came in and treated me like, you know, I had something to contribute, means a lot to me. So I try to emulate that.
Excellent, thank you. It's 10 o'clock and we have about another 10 minutes, so maybe everybody have one final question and we'll see how we do. Commissioner Skinner.
I think I don't have any questions. I think I'm all set with this candidate.
Okay. Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have thought all weekend how I would ask this question. And as anybody knows me by now, I shoot from the hip, and I
Yeah.
think this question's going to be a shoot from the hip. I tried to think of a way to ask it,
Sure.
and
Just do it.
I'm just going to do it. Something that has impressed me since the very first day that I got here is the longevity of the employees that are here, the loyalty that they have to the Mass Gaming Commission, and the continuity and the leadership that we've had, whether it be Loretta, whether it was Karen, they were here for years and years. And I think because of that, you know, the Mass Gaming Commission has run as well as it has because of the continuity and the longevity. So the shoot from the hip question, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years here at the Mass Gaming Commission?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to get this role, I would be here, I think. Again, I'm really energized by this. It's, you know, I do think we all need advancement in our careers and new challenges, and I am finding that, you know, in this interim role. It's exciting, it's challenging, it's sort of, I think, something I needed that I maybe didn't even know I needed. And so, you know, if I were to stay in this role, I would be committed to the agency. I do recognize the importance of institutional memory, and we have a lot of that, and it's hard when you lose it. So I think that's important, but I am committed to the agency.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well said, Commissioner Hill. Commissioner O'Brien.
So I usually end interviews with this question. I know it can be a little awkward in this setting,
It's all good.
but what is it, if anything, that you would want to ask of this body of 5
Yeah.
in terms of your consideration in applying for this role?
I think I do have a question, and it's a question that I actually asked in my first round, but I'd be interested to hear from all the commissioners. And so that is how you see the IEB evolving, especially in the light of sports wagering in the next sort of year or two, because I think that's really important for how, again, we make our plan to staff up, smooth out, all of those things is what you're thinking.
So before anybody answers that, I was
That's
going to
a
look to you about a policy
I'm
question.
going to say that seems to be
Yeah.
a policy
All
discussion.
right. It's like before you even moved, I was like, all right.
Well done, candidate Monahan. But I'm going to say that's not marked up on the agenda.
Okay.
But I think all ears were listening for an answer
Yeah.
just now.
Love the question. Had the same thought.
I have a replacement
Brian.
question.
So
that
is there anything else?
Yes.
And so I can
Yeah.
pivot, and if the burning question is not appropriate for this agenda,
Yeah.
what else do you feel like you want to tell the 5 of us? I know we've worked with you, but is there anything else that you feel like you want to bring to our attention?
I feel like I've covered everything that I wanted to tell you, especially, you know, about my time at the firm, because that's not something that we've talked about previously and sort of my experiences there. But I just want you all to know that I appreciate this opportunity. I'm really excited about the role, and if chosen, I would be very honored to sort of continue in this role in the IEB. So thank you.
Well, you don't have to make your concluding statements yet, because I want to give Commissioner
Sorry.
Maynard the opportunity to ask any other questions.
Well, you hit my first negative of the day, which is she didn't answer that, Eileen, with, she's a member of the Honorable Order of Kentucky Colonels, which I happen to know.
It's not on my resume.
And as a fellow Kentucky Colonel, I appreciate that.
Okay, we're going to have to explore that.
Is there, you know,
That will be all over Twitter now, about your Kentucky connection.
you know, it goes back to what Eileen was saying, Commissioner O'Brien. What do we need? You're going down the elevator.
Mhm.
You're pitching all 5 of us 30 seconds.
Mhm.
Why are you the IEB director?
I think I'm the IEB director because I have the knowledge I've spent 3 years learning and sometimes drafting the regs and the statute. I have that knowledge right off the bat. I have relationships. In my role as Deputy GC, I've had the opportunity to work across the commission with people all across the divisions of the commission. So going in day one, I have those relationships that I can go to. And I've worked on the same vein outside, right? I have the outside relationships with sort of the operators, the licensees who need to be called sometimes on short notice. And I have the interest. Like, I want to do this. I think this is really exciting. It's a really exciting time for the IEB in this moment of transition. And I think I'm up for the challenge. So that's my pitch.
Thank you.
Are we all set? So,
Okay.
Caitlin, I have no other questions, but I do want you, to say, again, a big thank you. We do have Chief Muldrew now here. We want to thank you, Dave, for your work on the screening committee. And we want to thank you, Caitlin, for applying. You are in the interim position. It was not a given that you would apply, and we appreciate your application. We appreciate your candid answers today, your thorough answers today, and your willingness to do this in public. It is not easy, and to those who are watching, this is an extraordinary process, and we just want to recognize your work here.
Thank you.
Regardless of the work that you've been doing for us, your work here today, it is a factor of the open meeting law that we have to deal with. The open meeting law, as you mentioned, it's not always easy for us. But I think, given that is the state of the law, we navigate it pretty well. And to that, I'm going to conclude again. Thank you, Commissioner and Commissioner, for your work.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you, Caitlin.
We're going to have a 10-minute break. The next candidate's going to be 10:20. I think we're actually ahead now. Oh, good. Yeah, 10 minutes. So, have something to eat. I don't want any blood sugar. I had a whole
Good morning again. This is a reconvening of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. We are live today. It is Wednesday, January 31st, public meeting number 497. And at the beginning of the meeting that started at 9 a.m., there may have been a recording mishap. And so I want to just note for the record again that I did file with my appointing official 23B3 disclosure out of very much an abundance of caution. To note that, given we had one internal candidate today that we're interviewing for the IEB Director position, Caitlin Monahan, the fact that the IEB Director reports to the Chair, I thought was a notable distinction, although I only know Attorney Monahan professionally, that I should make that disclosure, again, out of an abundance of caution. So we have had our first interview, and want to, again, thank the screening committee, chaired by Commissioner Skinner, and then also a member of the committee was Commissioner Hill, and now we do have Chief Muldrew here. So again, thank you very much, and we are ready for our next candidate. Our next candidate is Robert Charette.
Thank you.
Hi.
Morning.
Nice to see you in live instead of on a Hollywood square.
This is much more preferable than the.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Good morning.
Yes, we work often virtually, and it's very participatory, and we really appreciate the opportunity to use it, but it is a delight to be here in person with you today.
Yes,
So.
this is a much better dynamic. I didn't have to worry about whether I was going to be able to log on, whether the link was going to work. This is
Yeah.
much less angst. So
Yeah.
thank you.
The one thing that we have learned is to be very tolerant about any tech mishap, even if it takes an hour to fix. So anyway, welcome today to the Gaming Commission. First I extend our apologies to you that you have to do this in public, but as you know, we're being streamed today. It's part of our obligation to ourselves to be fully transparent and to fully comply with the open meeting law. So we appreciate your being here under these really quite abnormal conditions.
Not a problem.
And we thank you for applying for this very important position and being part of the process.
Thank
And
you.
congratulations for being one of our two finalists.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, great. So we're going to start with some questions, and going to go in the same order. Commissioner Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Charette, it's nice to see you in person.
Yeah.
And I echo everything that the Chair said in terms of congrats to you for becoming a finalist in this process. My question, I'll start, it's a sort of a softball icebreaker type question. Tell us what you understand the IEB Director job to be, and explain to us why you're interested in the role.
Sure. So, to my understanding, the IEB Director oversees the vendors, employees, background investigations that have to do with folks who are either working for or going to be participating in with the Mass Gaming Commission. I've been supervising folks for now 15 years. Much of that is compliance-based, audit-based, protocol-based, especially now in my current role as the chief of my agency. I establish protocols. I have to ensure that those protocols are enforced. That's a large part of my job right now. So,
A follow-up, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
You've had, Mr. Charette, quite an extensive and impressive career in law enforcement, and I kind of asked this question during the preliminary interview. what we do here as an agency is more civil in nature, and nothing I wouldn't think that's quite as sexy as what you're used to handling in terms of investigations. And so how do you see that criminal background and criminal investigatory work transferable to this position here to this role?
I just think the skills that you learn as an investigator, not only during my time as conducting the investigations I was in the field for about 15 years before I became in management in my agency. The last 15 years I've been out of management overseeing those investigations. You just develop a skill set on how to see things, how to ask questions, how to handle people, how to handle different types of personalities. I know that this job doesn't, the cases that we handle on a regular basis are dealing with volatile, violent individuals, the worst of the worst. And I think, like I mentioned to you, those are sexy cases, but when you're in your 50s, it is time to dial it back a bit. And the skills that I've learned in the past, I think, absolutely would be transferable into dealing with folks having issues with a background or a vendor who may not be complying with their work order. So,
Thank you.
Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, very nice to see you again.
thank you, sir.
So could you explain to the full commission your managerial style, how you communicate with those that work for you or under you? You gave us a brief explanation
Sure.
during the first interview, but here's your opportunity to talk to all of us about your style.
Sure. So, I've always been a people person. I think managerial styles differ. The way I had to manage the district 4 years ago when I took it over is much different than my managerial style now. 4 years ago, I was abruptly put into place to take over a dysfunctional district that had been a toxic work environment and had been really muddled in chaos for years. So taking over that district, my demeanor had to be much different than it is now after watching the district go through the hurt, the healing process, and now after full recovery, I don't have to be the same manager as I was back then. My style has changed, it's evolved. Every manager needs to have certain principles that are unwavering and can't be compromised. You have to have honesty and you have to have integrity. If you don't have those two, nobody's going to follow you. Nobody's going to follow you. An effective leader also needs to have compassion, empathy, the ability to communicate. As much as we, all think that and would like our folks to be robots and be able to show up to work every day and do their job, there are things in their lives that will impact their work performance. You've got to understand that. You've got to have empathy when it's warranted. You've got to show compassion when needed. Every manager needs to have those attributes, or any effective manager should. And then based on the scenario, when I first got there, I needed to be more direct. This is what we are going to do, and this is the reason why. After seeing the district do a complete 180, we just recently received our federal employee viewpoint survey. And back when I took over the district, our district was under a corrective action plan, which was unheard of in the federal government. The 94 districts and probably another 20 or so entities down at headquarters, we were dead last, and we just got our results back in the surveys based on district morale, job satisfaction. We finished number 4. My management style now is different. We have turned that aircraft carrier around. So, much more collaborative. The people who work for me are tremendous, tremendous. I have 5 direct reports. They are all excellent at what they do in their mission set. So now it's time to let them do their job. I'm not a micromanager. I can be if I have to. But fortunately, the folks who work for me and the folks who report to me are tremendous at what they do. So in order to I need to let them do their jobs for us to succeed. It was a much different dynamic when I first took over, but I don't think you can have solely one type of leadership style, because not every situation you walk into is going to be the same. I know we had some interaction during our first interview where you said that the family atmosphere that I now describe in my district is something that you all here at the Gaming Commission have developed. And so that would be welcomed. It's easy to maintain. It was not easy to take a dysfunctional situation and get it to the point where we are now. The maintenance, that's the easy part.
Madam Chair, as well.
Yes.
So for the public and for my fellow commissioners, what I had said was that we have a very close-knit division down there in IEB. We have experts in their fields, in the departments that they have, and they work very, very well together. And I asked Mr. Charette, give us your management style like I have today, but can you elaborate a little bit more? And you touched upon it briefly. Are you a hands-on type of manager? Are you someone who's going to delegate to the workers? Explain to us how you would work day to day.
When you've got people working for you who you trust, delegation. If you trust who's working for you, there should be no need to be hands-on and micromanaging. So the folks that my managerial team, fortunately, I was able to cherry pick them over the course of the last 4 years. It's a completely different managerial team than what I took over. These folks are experts in their mission. So there's no need for me to be hands-on. There's no need for me to micromanage. We have meetings once a month so that we can go over the state of the state for each mission group. Those meetings, when I first took over, were once a week. But if you've got competent people who are working for you, I think you need to trust that and delegate.
And the last question I have is, so what is the highest amount of people that you've managed? Ish.
Currently, around 55.
I'll yield at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner. Commissioner O'Brien.
Hi, how are you?
Have we-
It's nice to meet someone with a law enforcement background. Spent 16 years working for prosecutors' offices and have a lot of respect for what the marshals do. I had the privilege of working with John Gibbons before he took over in Boston.
Great man.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I thank you. I know it's not easy work. I do have a question about exactly what the investigative experience is in terms of the topic areas. I know that the marshals are very much a lot of, as your resume says, like a lot of fugitive task force cases and sort of protection details and those sorts of things and ops. Can you be a little more specific in terms of what types of investigations that you've worked on, if anything, outside of the fugitive tracking down? Were you writing 302s? Were you supervising and editing other people's 302s, the police reports, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so those reports in the U.S. Marshals, they're USM 11s. Those are our field reports. So hopefully I understood your question correctly. Are you about my experience conducting fugitive investigations or anything outside of fugitive investigations?
Sort of outside of the fugitive investigations, what can you talk to me about any other types of investigations besides the fugitive cases?
We do missing child cases, missing child investigations. We also now we can prosecute gun cases if we come across a fugitive who has a gun in their possession, typically we would have to refer that over to the ATF. But recently, we've now been delegated with that responsibility as well.
Is that charging authority or investigative authority, or both?
Both.
Both.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. But our bread and butter, as it has been for 235 years, are those complex, high-profile fugitive investigations. We're not getting, the folks that we're investigating, they don't want to be found, as you know. I mean, these are the murderers, the child rapists, these are the folks who, when they are apprehended, are going away for the rest of their lives. Hence the volatility, which is inherent with our job. It's a high risk, high reward type scenario. Last year, I think our agency arrested over 70,000 fugitives, and I believe 5,700 were murder cases. So you do the math, that's a lot per day, and things do go wrong. They've gone wrong in our district, but our bread and butter are the fugitive cases. We're in the infancy with doing the gun cases and the missing child cases we've done for a while. But we've found narcotics, and have been allowed to kind of just upon the arrest, been involved in the prosecution for that, for guns, so.
Can you talk a little bit in terms of the fugitive cases, in terms of use of financial records, tracking people down,
so
what kind of work that entails?
Yeah, so, excuse me. I was fortunate enough back almost 20 years ago. There was a subject up here in Boston who had, him and his two brothers were involved in a large narcotics ring, and you may be familiar with this case. And they, two of the brothers had an issue with one of the brothers. They went, knocked on the door, and they shot and killed him in front of their nephew and niece and sister-in-law. One of them was immediately apprehended. The other one was gone. That individual robbed a gun store down in Providence, left there with several high-capacity weapons. So he had been a fugitive for about 4 or 5 years. And I sat back, I talked with my partner, and we didn't have a nexus to kind of get involved with that at the time. But I said, this is, he's doable if we can somehow get access to this case. So we spoke with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The plan was that we were going to get a UFAP warrant, an unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, and it's really just a warrant on the body. There's really, nobody ever charges that statute afterwards, but it did allow us to get in the door. After that, there was, we had a meeting down in our office with all the stakeholders, the Boston PD, Massachusetts State Police, the AG's office up in Mass, the AG's office down in Rhode Island, the Rhode Island State Police, the Providence PD, the ATF, the FBI, and the plan was to get everybody around a table so that we could, everybody get on the same page, information sharing. I had a feeling it worked out the way I thought it was going to, is after a couple weeks, all those different departments and agencies have other responsibilities. Ours are to apprehend fugitives. So it solely fell on our lap. And, 4 months later, there are certain, I'd love to be more direct, and I'm not trying to skirt around it, but where this is a public hearing, I can't really get into some of what it took to eventually locate him in the Bronx. But he was apprehended. But we utilize that. Our technological operations group is the best in the country. We have a financial surveillance unit that deals with credit cards, any financial data that a fugitive may have, and oftentimes that they don't. A lot of the people that we're typically looking for don't have financial backgrounds, they don't have financial records, but at times, there are times they do, or their spouses may. So there are a lot of tricks to the trade, and I've employed every one of them over the past 28 years.
And is that one of the units, is that one of your reports when you're talking about the different units that report
No.
up to you?
No.
Okay.
No, so those are, we have a unit up here in Boston that deals with a lot of our technical operations. Our financial surveillance unit, for lack of a better term, is a deputy down in Connecticut who's had the training. He's one of the few in the country. And off the record, I could go into kind of greater detail on what that all encompasses. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be evasive,
No,
but.
I
yeah,
totally get it.
yeah, my
Yeah.
apologies.
Yep. And this is somewhat following up on Commissioner Skinner's question earlier in terms of transferability of those skills. You know, a lot of what IEB looks into is background in one sense that you're talking about, and then background in a different sense in terms of suitability for the vendors and qualifiers and the licensees. And I guess looking for whatever else you could add to what you think your skill set would bring to those types of investigations.
I think if you're a good investigator, those skill sets are transferable, whether you're pursuing a fugitive, whether you're investigating a homicide, whether you're investigating possible indiscretions in someone's background. I've had extensive knowledge, hands-on and overseeing, of using every tool possible to get the desired result. It would be no different in taking a look at the background, a background check for a vendor, or a background investigation for an employee. Certainly a much different level, but the importance of this to the Gaming Commission is you need to ensure that the people who are working for the Gaming Commission are above board. They have nothing in their past that is going to embarrass the system. So I'm not sure whether I've articulated myself well
Yep.
enough, but in my opinion, if, you know, that the case I was discussing ended up being a top 15 case in the District of Rhode Island, the first case ever either apprehended in Rhode Island or a top 15 that was originated in the 235-year history of our district. If we could figure that out, then I'll certainly be able to figure out and tackle any issues with, you know, background and discrepancies.
Thank you.
Commissioner Maynard?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So I'm sorry, I just to expound a bit,
Yeah.
I'm clearly an outsider. I would be better able to answer that question, you know, having been in the position for a while, and it's once I had a better idea of the type of investigations that would, and I think I know, but I don't want to be presumptuous enough to, you know, state with certainty that I absolutely know what type of investigations the IEB are diving into and what you were talking about. The skills are transferable. So-
Follow-up question, please? That is a really fair observation, and I'm glad that you've added that. So you're not going to be as familiar with all of the work that would be right before you. So what would be the first steps you would take? You know, let's say the first month, if you were hired as IEB Director.
Listen to people, listen and learn. If I was to step in here and be selected as the director of the IEB and come in here professing that I know what's going on, that's not the case. We have a political appointee in every district in the Marshal Service, and I believe we may have discussed this at the first interview. The political appointees who come in and look, listen, and learn are the most effective. The ones who come in with an agenda and on day one want to start reestablishing policies and protocols for an agency, that they have no experience in and have no idea what we actually do, it's a path that is not a prudent one to take. I would, from what I've been told by Commissioner Hill, you all have surrounded yourselves with good people. This role would mean I am surrounded by good people. I would trust that I'm going to learn from them long before they're ever going to learn from me. I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to come in and on day one know how this is run. But so my entire life has been figuring things out. I'm first-generation college grad, had no guidance. Both my parents were too busy working. Somehow, I figured that out. Once I got to college, 5'5" athlete, clearly at a competitive disadvantage. Just time to, figure that out and, grind through it. Get out of college, and within a year, lost my father. There's no textbook on how to be a man, It's never mind, at that point in time, the head of a household. Just had to figure it out, Shortly thereafter, I lost my mother 3 weeks after my daughter was born. There's no textbook on how to be a parent. Well, there probably are, but I lost, that potential guide to get my wife through some of these scenarios. Just had to figure it out. This job as a chief, when I got dropped in there 4 years ago, abruptly, I was told by the director, "You are now the chief, fix this place." Nobody groomed me for that position. I had to figure it out on my own. And this would be a similar scenario. If I was fortunate enough, you thought my skill set, my experience, my personality would be a good fit for the Gaming Commission and for that unit, I would figure it out. And I would rely heavily on the people who have the institutional knowledge to guide me to a point where I've got institutional knowledge.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Commissioner Bryan.
Thank
Thank you for yielding to me.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. So, Chief, these are very interesting, these public interviews, and this is my first, I don't know if it's yours. But I was thinking about your extensive background. Let's take it to its basic. You're putting together a report. How do you make a decision on what goes in that report and what goes out of that report when it comes, let's say, to the full commission, right? What information goes in, what information goes out, and why? And really, the reason I'm asking you the question, right, is because I read these reports all the time. And I know that whoever's putting these together is making a judgment call on what needs to go up and what needs to go down. And you alluded to it earlier, things are changing. Things have changed in the last 5 years, 10 years. So tell me a little bit about your decision-making and how you present information.
All pertinent information should be put in a report, good or bad. I'm sure Commissioner O'Brien would agree. Those who withhold information are going to get burned, and they're going to burn other people. All pertinent information should be in a report. You shouldn't have an agenda when submitting such a report. Collect the facts, here are the facts, push it to the folks who need to review it, and let them make that determination. I think, and we discussed this in our first interview, with the Gaming Commission in particular, transparency is vital. There were a large percentage of opponents to having wagering legalized, gaming legalized in Massachusetts. The Gaming Commission has to be locked in 100% of the time. There can never be a slip-up. Everything has to be transparent. We're here for a public hearing, and I understand why. There can never be a point in time where the Gaming Commission makes a mistake and the opponents can say, told you, this should have never been allowed. And that's a tough bar to have to, get over every day. You need to be 100%. You can't make a mistake. You can't give, personally, I thought it was a prudent move for the politicians in the Commonwealth of Mass to bring gaming to the state. Folks who want to wager, they're going to, whether they have to travel to Connecticut or Rhode Island or Vegas, they're going to. Capture those tax dollars, use them for noble purposes, and that's what's being done here. But as far as information gathering, that's exactly what it should be. Information gathering, putting it in a report, moving it forward, and let people make determinations based on that. But, yeah, there's never been in the business of withholding information. That's a good way to ruin your career.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, so you drew a distinction, which I appreciate and was glad to hear, between management and leadership, right?
Big difference.
And you're part of the oldest federal law enforcement agency in the country, right?
Yes, sir.
And so, what's leadership mean to you? And who's a leader you look up to? What leadership are you going to bring into this position?
So, I worked for someone for the better part of 15 years, my predecessor, who the folks he supervised, they had to respect the title. We're professionals, They had to respect the title, but they did not respect the person who held that title. It's more important for me, as a leader, to have people respect the individual first. If you're in a position as a leader where you're forcing them to respect the title, then you've done something wrong. That doesn't work. It'll move the ball down the field amidst chaos, turbulence, toxicity. I would prefer that, people who I manage respect me as the individual first. And if they do that, then they clearly are gonna respect the title. My folks who work for me, they don't think that I care about them. They know. They know. And that's, you need to be sincere. I'm not doing it because, I need to check that box so that I can curry favor with whoever in my office. No, I do it because you truly care. An effective leader cares about their people, period. And when you do that, you're going to get that in return. You had another portion of your question that I think I've lost my train of thought.
It was really just what are you going to
The leader I
bring
look
in?
up to.
Yeah.
So, I had mentioned about the scenario with my mother. It was I worked for the supervisor at the time, and I'll give him a shout out in a public hearing, Billy Fallon. Great guy. He was the chief up in Boston for a period of time. When I started off in New York City for a few years as a young deputy in my late 20s and got transferred up to Providence. Billy Fallon was my supervisor. And we had like I had mentioned, my daughter was born. It was my firstborn. 3 weeks later, my mother is diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. 6 weeks later, she dies. During that span of time, it was September 11th hit. So I automatically got the call to go down to New York for the search and recovery mission because I just worked down there. I knew the area, I knew the people, I knew the personalities, I knew the topography, I knew everything. I had spent a few years down there. And I remember reaching out to Supervisor Fallon at the time and saying, listen, Billy, under any other circumstance, throw the gear on my back, and I would march down to New York City. But, my mother's not doing well, and I can't go, And he said to me, don't worry about it, man. He said, take care of business at home, and we'll get someone else down there. I'll never forget that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned empathy earlier as a characteristic that you value, so thank you for that answer.
I think I learned a lot from Billy that day.
Say again?
I learned a lot from
Yeah.
Bill Fallon that day.
Absolutely.
I walked through a wall for him, and I still would to this day.
Yeah. On a follow-up to Commissioner Maynard's earlier, question on information, and I really appreciated your answer, that you wouldn't withhold anything that would be, vital to, if it had to come to the commission for our decision-making. And I suspect that your work and your record reflects that. You also mentioned your, understanding of protocols and, internal controls and those requirements. We're challenged here because we do most of our work in public. And we have some flexibility to do things in executive session, and we utilize that appropriately and carefully. The challenge is also that you may have information that you want to share, but there's no clear path for sharing it. I don't know if you've had a chance in your earlier screening interview, but have you had a chance to, and this is a complex question, if you don't have an answer, that's fine, because I think all of us we still turn back to the statute to understand, but our governance structure. Have you had a chance to see, that we deal with 5 commissioners and the structure of the organization? Have you did anybody
I
go
took a
through that,
look.
or what is your sense, and maybe we could fill in to help?
Well, I know the structure of the commission. I do know that.
The 5 of us, yeah.
Correct, yes. I'm not sure I'm understanding your question. I know part of it may be what we just addressed here, where, I've got some sensitive information that I'm obligated not to put on a public record. It would compromise my agency, it would compromise ongoing investigations. I'm not sure if
So our
it's a
legal
similar
team would be able
scenario.
to help you if you,
Yes.
you would turn to the legal team and see,
Clearly.
what, are there mechanisms like the executive session? Under the statute, uniquely, this position reports to the chair. And, the rest of the division leaders report to the executive director. So one of the challenges is that the chair may receive information, and it becomes a challenge as to what do we do with that. Have you had any situation where you're, addressing the person to whom you report, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to move things forward and also stay within the policies, within bounds of policies and procedures that make it tricky? And probably the follow-up question is a good one, is if you disagree, how do you resolve that?
Well, I think when we argue, the relationship between a federal prosecutor and myself or one of my deputies is organic. It's fluid. They're not always going to agree on a path to take. I'll always defer to someone who's got their JD as opposed to someone who's only got their bachelor's degree.
I'm going to just note that. Sorry, Brad.
I know, poor Brad's alone.
Now, if I feel strongly
We
about
like that
The
answer.
only one with common sense on the commission.
if I
I'll
feel
keep all my comments to myself.
sorry, Commissioner Hill.
No, you're having a
We're
moment
together, you
together
and
right
I.
now, yeah.
If I feel strongly about something, I would do my best to attempt
Yeah.
to cajole or persuade or influence, you or anyone else to see things the way I do, but that's can be done in a professional manner. That can be done with diplomacy. There may be times where we agree to disagree, and that's okay too. But as long as whatever decision you would be making based on information you're receiving from me, you're receiving all that information, just like when we're
Yeah.
prosecuting, and I'm dealing with a federal prosecutor. Here's everything we got. I'm not sure you should want to exclude all this here.
Yeah.
And I just had this disagreement not too long ago with a federal prosecutor, and ultimately she chose to go down a path that I was hoping she didn't go down, but that's the way things go, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. I believe she does for me, and we just had a professional disagreement. That's the way it is, and you just, you move on. But
That's a very helpful answer. So if you're wondering, it's exactly what I was hoping to hear, so thank you.
I was going to come out and just say you will always be right, but
Or-
I didn't know what
no,
that.
No, exactly, or that you require an order, like that would be an interesting, I wondered with your law enforcement background, might you, and I'm not hearing that at all, so. no.
It's,
And I'm in that.
the law enforcement field is filled with alphas, and for some reason, these alphas believe that butting heads like rams is more productive than sitting down and kind of discussing things in a diplomatic manner. I don't get it. I have this issue constantly down with the Rhode Island State Police and the Providence Police Department are in that small sandbox that's Rhode Island. Those two just have a difficult time playing nice together, and they're the two biggest kids in that sandbox. So I am constantly in a mediation role, because on our Rhode Island Violent Fugitive Task Force, we have state troopers on that task force. We have a member of the Providence PD. We rely on the Providence PD for a lot of those sexy cases that we were discussing earlier. And it's weird. I've never been able to kind of. It will always be befuddling to me how the Providence PD may dislike the Rhode Island State Police in the abstract. The Rhode Island State Police may dislike the Providence PD in the abstract. But when I get the command staff in a room because we have to work through an issue, it never seems to be a problem. That guy on that side of the table doesn't dislike that guy on the side of the table. I think it's like that. I guess it's human nature where it's
Institution.
it's easier to dislike a group or an entity in the abstract until you're dealing with someone from that group or entity, and you realize, all right, this is they're good people. So fortunately, I do have a good friend over at the Providence PD who was ascended to a deputy commander level. Same thing over at the Rhode Island State Police. So when we do have issues, I'm typically the mediator. But it's always been fascinating how folks who should have a certain level of diplomacy and intellect just dislike another agency in the abstract. It's bizarre to me, but
It's not like it's special to Rhode Island.
It's not exclusive to Rhode Island. I know the dynamic up here between some of the major stakeholders as well.
So on that note, I'm just going to ask another question before I go back to Commissioner Skinner. Rhode Island ties, your New York ties. We're in Massachusetts. And I thought about that when I read your resume. And first off, it's such a commendable resume.
Thank
Your
you.
service is so appreciated. And I just want to thank you for that. Tell me how you navigated learning the differences in laws, regulations, policies, where you shifted from New York to Rhode Island, and how you'd apply that here in Massachusetts.
So federally, I'm not a complete outsider in Mass. I was born and raised in Taunton, Massachusetts. I currently reside in Massachusetts. I'm a carpetbagger. I run down there and make my money in Rhode Island. I bring it up here to the Commonwealth, and I constantly remind my folks who I collaborate with in Rhode Island that they're a glorified county that we should absorb. But
You can take a lot of grief for that. I'm sorry.
so we, federal statutes are the same whether they're
Yeah.
in New York, whether they're in Massachusetts, Boston. So that's always been an easy transition. It's the dynamics at the state level which are different in New York than there are in Providence, than they are here in Massachusetts. And that's just another scenario where, you know, as they, you know, as they're applicable to something, anything here with the Gaming Commission, that would be something that I would figure out, and I would ask questions. I would learn state crimes outside of what the Gaming Commission is dealing with. I've got a pretty good grasp of that in Massachusetts. We had, I know I was assigned to the District of Rhode Island, but back when I was in the field, there was a black hole down in southeastern Mass. There was a great need in Brockton, Taunton, Fall River, New Bedford for a marshal service presence, and there was none down there, and it was based on manpower issues. The Boston office did not have the manpower to assign someone down there. In Rhode Island, both my partner and I were assigned to the Violent Fugitive Task Force in Rhode Island, so talked about it. I said, you know something, why don't, let me see if we can make this work. So I had a meeting with the chief up in Boston at the time, who was Billy Fallon. So I went up and I met with him, and I spoke with him about it. I said, listen, I don't want to be jumping over the fence and poaching cases here, but, you know, I'm trying to think of the star, the agency as a whole, as opposed to our little kind of 94 little districts here. And we're doing a disservice to the taxpayers and the citizens of that area by not having a marshal service presence down there. We have resources, we have financial resources, technological resources. We have a skill set that's different and that's valuable. We are experts in that field. That's what we've done. That's what I've done for almost 3 decades now. Folks who work for the Mass State Police may be assigned to that unit for, you know, several years and then leave. Same thing with detectives within agencies. And the state police has more resources than the locals do. We have more resources than them, and it'd be nice to be able to collaborate. So I went up, and then I had to go and sell the idea to the locals. And what I've learned, and I'm sure Commissioner O'Brien will back me up on it, nobody wants to listen to a Fed when they're a local police officer. They just think that, you know, you're coming in and you've got all the answers. And I went down, there was my old neighbor who got me interested in law enforcement was a lieutenant with the Taunton Police Department. So I reached out to him and I asked him if he could just get me through the door. You know, they had a meeting, for a detectives meeting down in southeastern Mass with all the different agencies. And I went in there and the first thing I said was, you know, I'm a Fed. And I disparaged one of our fellow agencies. I said, but unlike the FBI, I'm not here to look to take credit for your cases. Here to work them, here to apprehend them, here to step aside so you can step in front of a podium and talk about the arrest. If you want to throw some credit our way, it'd be greatly appreciated, but that's not what this is about. I wound up spending the next 8 years working amongst those 4 cities as a deputy in Rhode Island, in Massachusetts. It was unprecedented in the country. That has not happened anywhere else. And the relationships that I developed with the members of the Mass State Police VFAS unit and the locals down there have helped me and will help me in this role. I've got connections, you know, with the Mass State Police, and If I don't know someone in particular I need to talk to, I know somebody who's going to know that person. And it's, you know, it's about networking. And oftentimes I rely on that to get things done. And I will here, especially if I'm selected for this position, as a newbie. You know, I'm going to rely on the folks here, networking from outside, and to accomplish the mission of the IEB.
Commissioner Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have what is a follow-up really to the Chair's question relative to how you would approach the work that we do here and really just stepping in as an outsider, as you say, to really get an understanding of the kinds of work we do here and really the overall operations of the IEB. The 3 prior IEB directors, including the interim, were attorneys. There is a division within the IEB comprised of pretty much all attorneys. And how, I guess, would you go about preparing yourself? And these folks, I can tell you, will know more than you do, just in terms of the institutional knowledge. And my question is specifically, how would you go about, what would be your approach to understanding some of the procedures that we undertake here, that the IEB undertakes relative to adjudicatory hearings or just the entire adjudicatory process? How would you go about understanding those concepts that will likely be brand new to you? Things like standards of review, and because you would really be responsible for presenting or with legal counsel the IEB's case. So tell us how you would go about
So it's
establishing yourself and integrating those concepts.
ask questions, learn, do the research, ask more questions. It's the relationship you're describing, and this is, it's clearly selfish of me to say, I don't necessarily believe that you have to, an attorney's having a law background is a prerequisite for this position. I think I would be able to manage just fine without a law degree. But it's like a relationship that any lawyer has, or I've had with any attorney over the past 30 years. You work together. When we're building cases, they're the legal experts. I'm the investigator, they're the legal experts. I rely on their counsel, just as I would rely on the counsel of the lawyers who work at the Gaming Commission. I'm never going to profess to know anything. I'll learn something every single day. And typically I will learn from someone different every single day. But that relationship, it's no different than the relationship I've had with assistant U.S. attorneys over the past quarter century, 3 decades. I've worked with lawyers in the past daily, regularly. I'm in communication on a regular basis with attorneys. I'm learning something every day about federal statutes and laws. I don't know, I think when you think you've got all the answers, that's when you stop developing. And you're probably very naive if you ever get to that point where you think you know it all. And I look forward to that. I look forward, if this committee thought that I was the right fit for the job, I look forward to that challenge. I look forward to the next step in my career, my development. I would embrace it. I'd embrace the challenge. But I would ask the people who have the answers, that's who I'd be making my inquiries with. And I would listen and learn. And hopefully I wouldn't have to ask the same question twice. But if I needed to, then I'll ask it twice, I'll ask it 3 times.
I do it all the time.
Hopefully that addresses what you were inquiring about,
Thank you.
Council.
Commissioner Hill.
So, something that's impressed me here at the Mass Gaming Commission is the longevity of our employees and our directors and the continuity and the leadership of the Mass Gaming Commission. People don't leave here. Our past executive director and IEB director, they were here, about 10 years. So I have to ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years here with the Mass Gaming Commission, should you get this job?
Here. Yeah. I'm in it for the long haul. I'm no spring chicken anymore, but just for the interest of candor, I just turned 55. I'm not going anywhere. I still have a lot to give. I can't sit at home. My wife retired from her job as a U.S. Probation officer, and she could go sit on a beach down the Cape and never leave. I can't sit still, and she knows it. I'm always going to want to work. It's just innate in me. I need to have that type of stimulation every day. I need to collaborate with people. I just can't sit at home and, go through some mundane routine. If what you were looking to get from me is, I'm here for the long haul. If I get this position, you're not going to be sitting here having another public hearing in 5 years. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ryan?
Yep.
One question each, okay?
I'm gonna cheat. I got 2, but I think one can be short.
Okay.
I noticed that you have union experience in your time down in Rhode Island. Are you a member of the union? Can you just?
no, so I'm not a member of a union, but we have, we have a group, what they call detention enforcement officers. They're not deputy U.S. Marshals, but they have.
Oh, I see.
They're
Got
part
it.
of the union, yeah. So,
Okay.
It's not the auto workers, it's not the Teamsters, it's a small union, but,
But you had experience in terms of
I've had-
grievances and that sort
Yeah,
of thing.
absolutely.
Right. And my substantive question is a little bit following up on what Commissioner Skinner said, which is, you talked a little bit about it, you'd have to present cases to, AUSAs, right? They're writing a cross memo, they're making charging decisions. I'm sure you've had other experiences where you've made presentations of cases sort of beyond that. So can you talk a little bit about your experience, either maybe testifying in court or presenting in that regard?
No, I've testified on several occasions, not as an expert witness. Those expert witnesses are typically utilized to, in gun cases and drug cases. The times that I have testified have been times when we've stumbled upon narcotics, illegal weapons, and they're being charged with that on top of, their originating case. I've testified in federal court several times. It's nothing I'm uncomfortable with. It's nothing that is unusual to me. We have testified on, I got assaulted during an arrest at one point in time. I had to testify on that because the U.S. Attorney's Office, I didn't necessarily need them to bring the charge, but they wanted to bring the charge, which, knowing that we have their support is vital. We do a lot for them. They recognize it, but I had to testify in that matter. I've testified several times in the past 28 years.
Right. Okay.
But it's always typically been case related.
Right,
yeah.
right. Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Maynard?
So first, a clarifying question, not really 2 questions, but you talked a lot about your direct, your direct reports. Can you give me a dotted line, like, view of the agency too? How many people report up and into your tree?
Okay, so you have the political appointee, who is the U.S. Marshal.
Yep.
He's technically number 1. I am the Chief Deputy
Yep.
U.S. Marshal. I am number 2, but I am the highest career position that you can achieve in the district. Underneath that, I have my administrative officer, who I rely on heavily for all our budget issues. She is fantastic. I have my supervisor down at the Violent Fugitive Task Force. I have a supervisor for general operations, which takes care of everything else outside of the fugitive investigations. And most recently, because of the violence that's been perpetrated upon judges around the country, we now have a judicial security unit, where before I used to just have a judicial security inspector who handled any needs of our district judges. We now have an entire unit where we have a supervisor who reports to me, and a JSI, and a threat investigator. So those are the folks who report to me, and we have these contractors, court security officers, which if you come into our federal
CSOs.
building, you'll see them in the blue coats. They're all retired state troopers. Typically, those folks had high rank in whatever local municipality they worked for, the state police, or fellow federal agencies. The lead CSO, the supervisory CSO, reports to me as well. So you want me to go further down the umbrella, or is that?
I was really looking for a number.
He did say, I thought 55.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
55? Did I
I'm
miss
sorry.
that
Yeah,
earlier?
through
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure that I got
I'm
the
sorry.
the
Through
total.
those
I've got those
five,
five
you
will
got-
report to me, but under them's another
Got it. But
50
it
folks.
it sounds like I was the one who misheard it, so
No.
it's not on you, don't
but
apologize.
5 division heads.
Got it.
And then, okay.
So I,
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I didn't understand.
no, 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 it's my problem. So here's my real question. Did you like that, Jerry?
It was too close.
To,
Thank you for the clarifier.
the yeah, diversity, equity, inclusion is really important to us, and I heard you say it, and it caught my ear, that you learn from people, different people, all the time. Tell me something about promoting that, and that's a mission of ours, and how you'll step into that.
I have two examples for you. If I can give one, and if you want to hear about the second, one I told you all, Commissioner Hill and Commissioner Skinner heard about, so I'll hold that one in the event that you don't want to hear about it. But our political appointee, our marshal now is Wing Chow, and Chinese American, and he was appointed by Donald Trump. And Marshal Chow was the marshal only for a couple years when President Biden got elected, and typically they just look to clean house, get rid of the old, put in their new, and it was bothersome to me. Marshal Chow had done a good job in his 2 years there. Not that his predecessor didn't, or the person who would have taken his place wouldn't. But Marshal Chow was the first Chinese-American U.S. Marshal in the history of our agency. Not in Rhode Island, not in New England, in the entire 235-year history of our agency. He was the first one. And it was at a time where anti-Asian sentiment was running rampant. It was an epidemic in this country. Asian Americans were being brutally assaulted around the country. So I spoke with the marshal about it, and I knew that they had two other people in mind that they wanted to, Senator Reid and Senator Whitehouse wanted to nominate for that position. One of them's a good friend of mine, and I hope he's not listening. But I just figured we need to get this story out here, because this isn't fair, it's not right. President Biden actually had issued an executive order, 14031, specifically dealing, he issued two. One, with an executive order to recruit and retain minorities. Executive Order 14031 even narrowed that down to recruit and retain Asian Americans. So the fact that we had the only Asian American ever to be appointed to the position of U.S. Marshal, and they were going to look to remove him to put someone else there that was not, a minority class, it was something that I didn't think was right or justified. So I did create a somewhat of an information campaign, and I reached out to the Providence Journal, someone over there who I know and have dealt with for years. It's been a mutually beneficial relationship. And she did a big expose on him. We then had members of the Asian American community come into the U.S. Attorney's Office for a big meeting, so that Marshal Chow and the U.S. Attorney at the time chaired, which was extremely productive, and that made it out into the media. There was like a subtle mass media campaign to let people know in the District of Rhode Island that there's something unique here, something special. The only Chinese American U.S. Marshal, period, out of 94 districts for 235 years. So it wound up being a successful campaign. I was speaking to one of the judges in our district who I have a good relationship with, who happens to be best friends with one of the senators, and the senator told him that there was no way that he could ever remove Marshal Chow now and place him in. And I remember speaking with the judge, and the judge had told me, he says, I don't know how you did it, but you politicized a politician. I said, it was the right thing to do. It shouldn't have taken that for them to realize what they had here. And oh, by the way, they would have been in, I don't know if violation is the correct word, but they would have been certainly contradicting President Biden's executive order to retain and recruit Asian Americans. But more recently, I had if you want me to continue, or
Feel free.
okay. More recently, my administrative officer, who I've already mentioned, is someone I lean on heavily. I trust implicitly. Always make sure you trust the person who's handling your budget, because if you can't trust that person, then you're in trouble. I know there's another marshal who's a good friend of mine who doesn't have an administrative officer who's locked in, and it's very problematic for him. But her name's Linda Ramos, and she's a Colombian. And prior to me becoming the chief, the administrative officer position, and it's a convoluted kind of scale we have. So I'll try to articulate myself well enough to kind of simplify it and break it down. Her position was a budget analyst at a GS level 9. At the time, back in 2017, 2018, the administrative officer position was a GS 11 or 12, which meant she could leap from a GS 9 to an 11, 12 position. She put in her application for the vacant AO position. She was granted an interview, and at the time the chief selected someone from the outside, which I certainly didn't agree with. When he visited my office and I asked him why she got overpassed, he made a disparaging comment about her ethnicity, which was just kind of what we had been dealing with for the better part of a decade. So I became the chief. The administrative officer that they had selected needed to be near her folks out in the West Coast. So I helped her get a position there. So now the administrative officer position was vacant once again. But between the time where Linda applied for it the first time, and this newly created vacancy, the position had been elevated from an 11-12 to a 13. And you're prohibited from competing for a GS 13 position if you're a GS level 9. You've got to go from 9 to an 11, 11 to 13. The only reason why she was able to compete for it in the first place is it was announced as an 11/12. So I told her to apply for it. She did and was told that she wasn't eligible to compete. So I reached out to headquarters, Human Resources, and I said, this makes 0 sense. Linda was eligible to compete for the administrative office vacancy 4 years ago. She made our cert list. She was granted an interview. For whatever reason, I wasn't in the room. They selected from someone on the outside. In those 4 years, she essentially had to groom the new administrative officer who didn't have the institutional knowledge that Linda did. So during that time, I wouldn't argue, I knew. She even was more qualified now to be the district's administrative officer. And the fact that she wasn't allowed to because it was a numbers game was appalling. And it was a hill I would have died on. And what they did is they knocked it back down to an 11-12. Oh, I'm sorry. She was allowed to compete for it, but only at the grade 12 level. So I figured, okay, well, let's pick one battle at a time. Let's get her in the position first. So she competed for the position. I selected Linda for the position at the GS 12 level, and then it was now time to barter and fight to get her the GS level 13 position, which other AOs enjoyed around the country. And once again, that was, it took me writing a lot of paperwork. It took me a lot of time speaking with folks, sending emails trying to justify this ascension to that level. And they finally, I think it was persistence, and they just finally wanted to shut the little man up in Rhode Island and you know, give her that pay scale. So she went from a GS 9 to a GS 13, which I'm not sure has ever happened in the federal government. But she deserved that position. She deserved it 4 years earlier and was overlooked. She deserved it. We promoted her into that role, and she is crushing it. She is tremendous at what she does, thriving in that role. And like I had mentioned, I know other chiefs who aren't as fortunate to have someone who does such a good job. She's professional. There's no drama. She comes in, she gets her job done, she does it remarkably well, and she goes home. And then I've never had an issue with her. It was a shame she got overlooked for that position 4 years ago. And you know, we were able, you know, thankfully to kind of right that wrong. But you know, those are, you know, the 2 instances that I've been involved with.
And I'm sure you'll carry that same thing over. So thank you.
And you identified, interestingly enough, in the grading, that how those can create a barrier.
Yep, absolutely.
And we are dedicated to trying to really think about how our own policies, procedures around hiring, procurement, customer service can often inadvertently create a barrier to making sure we have diverse.
So we're, you know, now that situation was rectified here in Rhode Island, it's something that, you know, I'm working on with Human Resources as well, because I'm not sure. I mean, we're a small district, so that scenario is relatively unique. In bigger districts, there is a lot more administrative personnel, so you will have 9s, 11s, 12s, 13s. In Rhode Island, it was 2 GS9s and a 13. Well, how will you ever promote from within someone who's deserving if they can't leap over that hurdle that that barrier that we've set in front of them? So it's something that is been successfully worked on after our issue in Rhode Island. I like to kind of fight those battles one at a time. If you go at headquarters with all three at once, you're not going to get a single one. We got her in the position first. We got her the pay that she deserved, and now we're in the process of kind of rectifying that scenario around other districts in the country that faced a similar challenge that we did.
So I'm going to ask a question, and that will be the last question. Then I want to give you the opportunity to ask us questions or make a closing statement. It's not a question I devised, but a question I've heard other interviewers ask, and I thought it was always a really telling and could be a fun question, too.
So this isn't going to be the softball question that Commissioner Skinner started off with?
No, this is a different one.
Which I swung and
It's
missed
probably a
at.
softball. I'm guessing from your answers today, it's a softball. It sounds as though you have had an administrative assistant at some point during your long career.
Yes.
And if I were to call them today, how would they describe you?
I'd implore you to call them. Not just call my administrative assistant. Call the people who work for me. It's always interesting to me when your people are hiring for a position and they want recommendations. And I could give you the U.S. Attorney for the District of Rhode Island, the Chief Judge for the District of Rhode Island, the Chief Judge in the First Circuit Court of Appeals. I think you're going to get a better glimpse of who I am and what type of leader I am by speaking to the people who work for me. Speak to my reports. Speak to the people who they report to. Because every day I go downstairs once a day and speak to everyone. Chain of command is important. In law enforcement, it's vital. I mean, if you don't have a chain of command, then you've got a dysfunctional scenario. But every one of those folks know that if they're having an issue professionally, personally, I have an open door policy. I don't wait for them to come up. I go down every day. Make it a point to go in, check in with them, how things going. Typically, it's not even work-related. I'm more concerned about how was your son's football game this weekend? How was, how's your mother feeling? Every day, I'll go and make the rounds. Not even beyond the people who work for me. Treat everybody the same. My son came into work with me at one point in time. He was applying to colleges last year, and he needed some help just getting through the standardized form. It was such a nightmare to get through. I'm glad I forgot.
application? Yeah.
Thank
For
you.
college.
Yeah. I've done one. My daughter was an athlete. She went in a different way, but I did it once. I'm glad I don't have a third child, or he wouldn't be going. He'd be picking up a trade. So, Brinny, who's a Puerto Rican, she works with the custodial team at she'll come in and I'll never have her clean my office. They'll give me the supplies and I'll do it. You don't need to clean my bathroom. You don't need to empty my bin. I'll do it. Had her come in, introduce her to my son, sat there and spoke with her for 5-10 minutes, and my son was privy to other interactions I was having through the day, and what struck him is, the interaction you had with her was the same as you were having with, the chief judge. I'm like, yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. I'd implore you to visit Rhode Island and speak with anyone from the chief judge to the maintenance staff down there and ask them, who I am, what type of leader I am, what type of chief I am, what type of employee I was. Now that would be something that I
Sounds
think
like
would
you
be
can add
enlightening.
the word person, Chief.
Thank you.
With that, I ask if you have any questions for us.
I don't. I mean, I would be interested if, and I don't know whether this is a question that could be answered, what could be expected? What's the day in the life of the director of the IEB like? Does he report here every day? Does he have interactions at Encore, MGM, Plain Ridge, Suffolk? What's the routine? What's the day kind of embody?
I
You go,
think-
you start?
I think I would just say every day is different.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, you could be on Encore today, and then you could be at MGM tomorrow, and then you'd be here for the next 3 days.
Love it.
Every day and every week is different.
Yeah.
Depends on the issue of the day.
Love it.
But
I
there
think is
are a
the
lot
best
of,
way I
a
can
lot
answer
of both really important relationships internally, which, you know, you've addressed today, and there's also really important relationships externally that you would have, and those stretch not only, you know, across the Commonwealth, but across the nation and around the world.
Fantastic.
So you're prepared for that, given your job,
Absolutely.
so.
Would embrace it, would love it, yeah. You know, create a new network in a new field, a new challenge, the next phase of my life. Yeah, I'd be humbled if you all thought that I was the right fit for this position, so.
Commissioners, anything else?
No, not from me, just a big thank you for your
Thank you,
time
ma'am.
here today.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for your interest in this position.
And your service.
Once
In
again,
your service, yeah.
in your
And your
service.
service.
We thank you primarily for doing this in public.
Yeah, not a problem. And I just want to say one last thing
Yeah.
to the commission. I don't have 20 applications out there. I'm not flooding corporate entities with applications. I applied for this position because it would integrate my experience, you know, 3 decades worth of experience in law enforcement, investigations, compliance, audits, with a passion I have for gaming. In college, I worked at the Raynham Taunton Dog Track, so I'm an outsider, but I do know what pari-mutuel betting is, what simulcasting is, chariot racing. This job, when it was brought to my attention, combines, you know, a passion in my experience. I don't have dozens of resumes floating out there. I applied for this position for a reason, because it's a combination of an interest and a passion, and I think I'd be a director that, you know, you all would be proud of, and that future directors would want to emulate. So,
How'd you come across the position, if you don't mind me asking that?
a friend of mine who works for the Commonwealth sent it over to me and said, "This has got you written all over it, my man." So I took a look. I'm like, I couldn't have. I said it to my wife the other day. I says, if I love my agency, I love it, always will. I told her if I could have designed a post-U.S. Marshal Service position for myself, this would be it. This would be it. So, be remiss if I didn't, I guess, conclude on that note.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I hope you don't get hit with traffic on the way.
That's all right.
A little
That
bit.
would be the one adjustment.
No, we wouldn't want you to have an unusual
It's
experience.
It's early enough, it should
8 in the
be.
morning, 8 at night. I know that going from my driveway to Providence is 30 minutes, and ironically enough, the courthouse in Boston is equidistant, almost to the mile. It doesn't take me 30 minutes when I need to report to the Boston office. So,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, thank you so much for hosting me. I appreciate it.
Thank you
Oh,
very
that feels
much.
good.
Commissioner Skinner, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing you again.
It's great to meet
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Commissioner Panda, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. You can go out this door, and I
Yep.
think, we're going to... How about 5 minutes here? And thank you again.
I would need to stay. Okay.
No,
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, this is a reconvening of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. Thank you for joining us. It is Wednesday, January 31st, 2024, and we are holding this meeting live. It's been a productive morning. This is public meeting number 497. We've heard from our two the finalists for the IEB Director position, and we again express our appreciation and gratitude for their application and their participation today in this public forum. So returning now, Commissioners, to 2B, the discussion and selection of IEB Director. Again, through the open meeting law, we are lucky enough to be able to conduct this process in public as we consider the two applications and the applicants' interviews today. I think everyone has the job description and the two resumes. Are we all set on that? All right. Commissioners, I'm just going to see who'd like to express their view first.
I'll start with both candidates. I'm sure they'll watch or will, as soon as they get home. Both of them for putting in. This is a very uncomfortable situation to have to come out in front of everybody publicly. I thought they both did an exemplary job answering the questions. They both have excellent skill sets, albeit different. Neither of them has the skill sets that we've had historically in the position with the first two directors. That's just the reality of the pool and the candidates who were at the top of the process. For me, there is a distinction between the management experience and the length of experience that Mr. Charette has in his career. He's obviously much further along than Caitlin Monahan. I can say that from my investigative and law enforcement background, however, the type of investigations that the marshals do are not as transferable as what you would think of from FBI, DEA, a detective unit, and a CPAC unit in a DA's office. I did want to drill down on that because I do know they do other things. They assist in other cases. They assist in the child protection unit, that sort of thing. But and I don't want any of this to be taken in any way demeaning his experience in this regard. But I did ask about specifics in terms of using financial information to track down the fugitives, which I knew was done. It sounds like that's primarily done from an individual in Connecticut and then passed along. Don't have any issue about the ability to sort of talk in front of a group, et cetera, but I don't think has quite the level of experience I might have been hoping for in terms of sort of presenting case strategies, case postmortems, that sort of thing after a case. I found them both to be very credible. I think Caitlin does not have the length and number of investigative experiences that Mr. Charette has. What she does have is, and nor does she have the level of management experience that he has in terms of the people, the 5 direct reports and the body of 55 that he's been supervising. I liked his answers about management style. My concern is it's not a requirement to have a JD for this job.
Could you say that one more time, please?
It's not a requirement to have a JD for this job. I do think it's a challenge to not have a JD for this job. And I do feel that the lack of Massachusetts regulatory legal OML experience, there's a lot to learn coming in to a group that I think needs stability with the departure of the top 2. And we have lost 2 females at the helm of that, and in terms of diversity, she is a female candidate. I honestly was looking at it thinking, God, it would, we've talked about having succession planning and second in command structurally for that unit. we don't have that at present. But I do feel like jumping into that role with the type of investigative background and the lack of the Massachusetts and the legal experience, the gaming law experience, is troubling to me in that regard. So I have concerns about, again, we're looking at the two people who departed, and we're looking at the internal candidate, and it is not at the same level as the people who left. But I am leaning toward Caitlin Monahan as the more seamless transition into continuing to lead that group with the knowledge of the agency, the law, the scheme, and the relationships.
Can I just say ditto? This is, an
It's hard.
awkward process, Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
And I feel similar to Commissioner O'Brien, which is why I tried to draw out from Mr. Charette how he might be feeling about, as a attorney stepping into this role that has been historically filled by attorneys. And, the JD is a preferred degree, though I don't think it is absolutely required. I think that with Mr. Charette's background, however, really exclusively law enforcement, I do see his ability to come in and understand, the civil side of things. I know, he considers his work transferable, his investigatory work transferable. I do think that there's a good piece of this job on the civil side that is going to be challenging for him to come in and be comfortable with right off the bat. To the point that was made in terms of stability, historical, institutional knowledge, I think we have that in Caitlin, and she would be able to step right in. I don't know in this time of transition whether we have the luxury of allowing Mr. Charette to, I don't want to say leisurely, because that's definitely not going to be an option, but to, take his time really, because that's to really understand it. He will need to take his time to learn and understand a lot of our processes. And I spoke in the interview about the adjudicatory hearing and presenting the IEB's case and really understanding the concepts and the legal nuances to a lot of the things we do here. Adjudicatory bias was raised at the meeting as well. I do think that both candidates could do the job. I think one could step right in, the other would require a lot of lead time in order to really get himself comfortable, as comfortable as we need the IEB director to be, not only, to carry out the IEB's work, but to instill confidence in the team and support in the team, the IEB team. I think we have that in Caitlin. She's indicated that she's established relationships with throughout the agency, across divisions, including the ones that she's overseeing now. And I think that we should leverage that.
Commissioner Howell? Commissioner Maynard?
You want to go first? Go ahead.
I thought you were going to go.
I'm ready, but.
Go on.
Okay. I think you're going to hear the same theme here from all of us, to be honest with you. I really liked what Mr. Charette had to say in regards to his management style the fact that he was able to turn an agency around that, was not looked upon favorably, and in a very short amount of time, because of his management style, he was able to turn it around and go from what I think he said was 20th to number 4 in the country in regards to the agency. I loved hearing his DEI stories. He really cares about that issue, which is something that we all do care about. Not only does he care about it, but he was able to give 2 examples of where he really put his heart and soul into ensuring that 2 individuals got what they deserved, who were minorities. My biggest issue, however, and it's, again, the theme that we're all going to be talking about, is the learning curve in this position. He doesn't have the experience in licensing. He doesn't have really the experience in suitability that I think we would want to have right now. As we know, this agency is doing yeoman's work to license our folks and to do suitability background checks. And I think his lack of knowledge of the agency and the regulations and the laws, that's a key piece for me here. And Madam Chair, you asked him directly about how he dealt with New York and Rhode Island, and although he was able to adhere to the federal laws, here our laws are very unique, and we're known for that throughout the United States, Massachusetts, when it comes to our laws and our regulations. When you look at Caitlin, and take her out of the intern position for a moment, let's talk about her experience at the MGC. She has a knowledge of the agency, which I think right now is timely. We need somebody who has that knowledge. She absolutely has the knowledge of our regulations and our laws. She's implemented them. She's written some of them moving forward. Her institutional knowledge, her relationships with the people who she's worked with and will be working with, I think gives her a leg up over Mr. Charette. I think they're 2 very, very good candidates, and Commissioner Skinner, you said it, and I'll repeat it. Either one of them would have done a very good job. I truly believe that. But I think with what's already been said by Commissioner O'Brien, Commissioner Skinner, and to me, to a point, I think Caitlin really has the experience that we need right now, because we really need somebody in place who has knowledge of the suitability background checks, of licensing, which she has now gained over the last few weeks. So I, too, would be leaning toward, at this point, Madam Chair, Caitlin Monahan for this position, with the knowledge that I'm very fond of Mr. Charette. I think what he's done has been great. His experience is top-notch. But I think for what we're looking for in this position, Caitlin may have a little bit more knowledge at this time than Mr. Charette does.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The framework of which I try to make every decision is what is in the best interest of the Commonwealth. And it kind of drives everything that I do. I think that Chief Charette was extremely strong on his management background. He showed a lot of vulnerability in his answers and what he said. And I really think that it doesn't shock me that he took a district in receivership and turned it around, because I can see at his core his leadership abilities and his ability to motivate people. And I think he's right on the nose when he talks about, you've got to treat everybody the same. You got to give people respect. There's got to be more us versus them. And I just really appreciated his take on that. I think with Caitlin, I've had the opportunity to see her take on very complex tasks and issues. They're not always easy. The personalities both on the commission and in the commission, aren't always the easiest personalities to deal with, and I've seen her navigate that. You know, to Commissioner O'Brien's point, and I've heard it reiterated by my fellow commissioners, you know, I don't think anyone would expect the same level of investigatory background that Loretta and Karen had. I don't think either candidate has that. But I also think that we got to look at the opportunity and the opportunity to grow. I think both candidates have an opportunity to grow. But at the end of the day, you know, Chief Charette actually talked about a situation where there was someone skipped over in his line. And as he was talking about it, I thought about the fact that I didn't want to skip over potentially Caitlin and the work she's put in it. And, you know, I think that she's doing a fantastic job as interim. I think it's tough. I think that her talking about smoothing the hills moving forward was important to me. I think she understands that the commission doesn't want to just turn 23 into 23K, which I think is important to know. And so, you know, for those reasons, I'm leaning towards Caitlin, but man, I wonder if we can get Chief Charette in here somehow at the MGC. That was what I was thinking the whole time.
Yeah. I was too.
Madam Chair? Sorry.
Are you
Go ahead.
calling on me?
No, go ahead.
No,
My
thank you.
apologies.
No, Commissioner Skinner, I appreciate it. So, you know, I echo my fellow commissioners' thoughts about how appreciative we are for these two candidates, two exceptional candidates to come forward in this public forum. They are distinctly different, and for that I appreciate the work of the committee. Excellent job. I know there was a third candidate, and it probably would have provided even more diversity, but the two candidates were very different, but equally strong in their own right and committed to their mission. You know, we've had the benefit of working with Caitlin. Caitlin has been in the public for the last 3 years, really navigating our regulatory promulgation process, and was instrumental, I know. And I know that our outside counsel, who worked so closely with her, would give her full credit in terms of devising the system that would actually turn out to be the framework that we were able to adopt. It's not lost on me at all in terms of what Caitlin navigated, and at the same time advised us thoroughly on a, you know, just a slew of legal questions outside of the regulatory issues. I was pleased that she shows pride about her work in the sports wagering, and she should be really proud of that. I've had the chance now, you know, she's been in this position since her note, and it reminded me it was December 22nd. I think it was our holiday party that she took on the new role of interim, and over the course of the holidays and into January, I've had the privilege of working with her in you know, the reporting relationship that that we have, and Caitlin has been very you know, just very organized, not surprising in terms of her you know, wanting to raise issues with me, or, you know, give me a quick report on status of things, and I've appreciated that organization. You know, the back and forth that we've had in terms of some of the questions that she may have raised, and I especially appreciate that respectful nature and no surprise. Now I'm just going to turn to Chief Charette for a second. You know, the candidate we had today is an exceptional human being.
Mm-hmm.
His heart came through so vividly, and that heart has allowed him to accomplish, you know, all of this in his resume, and with great success. And that management, let's be clear, his humility, his heart, his recognition that empathy matters and compassion matters is critical to his success, but he's also doing everything right with respect to his intellect, his capacity to manage thorny issues, get tough investigations solved. And for that, I just want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for keeping us safe. And thank you for getting it right. And doing that with that level of respect and compassion and humility that makes for a great leader. It makes sense, as everybody has been saying, that Caitlin should proceed in the capacity that she has right now. It's there is no there's a learning curve for Caitlin too. Let's all be clear, right? This is a new position for her, and I love that she's excited about that. She's indicated to us that this was something that turns out it's really good for her, and I love that for her personally. I love it for her intellectual growth. I love it for her professional growth. And I want that for Caitlin, and I want it for the IEB team. I know that this IEB team, led by Kara O'Brien, Monica Chang, Kathleen Kramer in her interim position in terms of Chief Enforcement Counsel, the GEU and Detective Lieutenant Leo, who am I leaving out? Is that it?
Bert.
Oh, and then, of course, Bert Kane, the gaming agents. Thank you. I knew it was 5. 5 divisions, just like, I know this remarkable team at the IEB would respect the leadership of either candidate, and they would help either candidate be successful in that role. I have full confidence in that. Is there a bigger learning curve for, as he describes himself, an outsider? That's a given. But I have full confidence in the heart of the IEB team to work with either candidate to make them successful. And I know that they are right now working successfully under the leadership of Caitlin. So don't want to ever deter somebody who's not an internal candidate to apply. And I think that's probably what we're all struggling with. What's our message here? It just happens that we've had an outstanding internal candidate apply for this big job in this public forum, and we've had an outstanding external candidate apply. And I think probably what we can point to is the learning curve in this juncture and the timing of this organization right now may matter more than maybe it would matter at another time. Personally, I'm not necessarily convinced of that, and again, why? Because I really give the IEB team such credit. They would always have the back of their leader, whoever it is. But, I'm hearing from my fellow commissioners, I think you and I imagined, Chief Charette coming in and contributing in another role. I love that he says he loves his job. And so that makes me really happy to be able to say comfortably that I would point to having Caitlin Monahan assume the responsibilities of the IEB director. And I know that she will respect the role and responsibility of every member of her team and every member of the entire MGC team. So can I point out, though, I just love what you pointed out, the vulnerability of Chief Charette. In this way, the gift of this interview is clear to me, because he can always look back and realize he gave us a lot, and it was very, very impressive. So,
Madam Chair?
procedurally, yes.
If I could, I wanted to just make sure that I state for the record that I stand by the committee's decision to advance Mr. Charette, to this level. And I appreciate that you pointed out his personal strengths, exactly what you all saw today is what Commissioner Hill and Chief Muldrew and I saw. And, you know, very charismatic, positive attitude, and he showed his level of interest in this role. So I wanna make sure that, you know, there's this understanding that the fact that we're not, probably not going to be advancing Mr. Charette as the IEB director today is in no way reflective of, you know, my thinking that he would not be able to do this job, or that he would not be a good fit at MGC. And like the two of you, Commissioner Maynard and Chair, I do think that, you know, in some capacity, we'd be very lucky to have him join our team.
Other comments you want to add in?
Add in, no, but if you wanted
I guess
a
that
motion, I'm
we
ready to
would-
give one.
And Commissioner Hill, I love that. And I do, I guess we do need to formally vote. I think that's right. We've reserved that right, and it's, I think it's part of our requirements. And again, thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Skinner and Commissioner Hill, and thank you, Commissioner O'Brien and Commissioner Maynard, for your really important contributions today. I thought, and the questions that everybody asked were so helpful for me to understand the strengths of each candidate, so thank you. Commissioner Hill.
Madam Chair, I would move that the commission offer to Caitlin Monahan the job of our Director of Investigation and Enforcement Bureau, subject to any and all background and reference checks.
Second.
That's a second from Commissioner O'Brien. Thank you. Any further discussion, process around that motion? Okay. I'll do it in the order that I normally do. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
Commissioner Maynard.
Aye.
And I vote yes, 5-0. Thank you. As a matter of efficiency, having checked in with Councilor N.K., we decided to reserve the right to go into executive session so that we could learn from Chief Muldrew and Chief Lennon about the salary structure that has been in place, and then to consider what we might be able to come up with for strategy for making a formal offer, which of course would be memorialized in the offer letter ultimately. With that, we do have to have a vote, and as you know, I have to read the language into the record, so bear with me. The Commission anticipates that it may meet in executive session in accordance with GL, Chapter 38, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with selected IEB Director candidate, in this case, Caitlin Monahan, pursuant to Item 2 above. The IEB Director being non-union personnel of the Commission. The public session of the Commission meeting will not reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session.
You need a motion? Or are you thinking of something else?
I am thinking of something else. Can we pause for one moment? I need to just check on something as I read that language out loud. Thank you. Thank you. And my appreciation for allowing me to pause to just think about the language for the executive session, and I'm satisfied with my, my thinking now. Sometimes when you read something out loud, it throws you. So, the bottom line is that the public session of the commission meeting will not reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session, and I think that is exactly right. So we'll vote on this, and in the event we do decide to proceed with the executive session, the public component of this meeting will cease, conclude, and we just want to thank all of you who have been watching. Appreciate it very much. Okay, with that, any further discussion? Okay.
Madam Chair, I move that we go into executive session for the reasons you just stated.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
And Commissioner Maynard.
Aye.
I vote yes, 5-0. Thank you,
let's go
everyone.
with
Thank you
28.
so much. We appreciate it.